There's a lot of reasons to visit Orlando, and if you're watching this, I'm assuming that you're doing so because you're interested in the theme parks. Disney has a legacy here, Universal is its competitive runner-up, and between them both, there's just so much touristy kitsch that personally, I love for really no good reason at all. But wait, you might ask, is there not a third theme park option, the one that's so different from all the others? Yeah, I mean, SeaWorld is a park you can visit, but it's an absolute mess that I've covered many times over. But did you know there are even more parks in the area? Yes, that's correct, because if Disney, Universal, or even SeaWorld weren't cutting it for you, then you can visit Fun Spot, which has not one, but 2 locations in the Orlando area. What makes Fun Spot different from the rest of the parks is that these are essentially unthemed amusement parks, which, when you really look at them, are almost no better than a parking lot carnival. Speaking of which, you might have caught my video a while back where I covered Fun Spot Atlanta, which is actually literally in a parking lot, and yet somehow has a world-class monster of a coaster with Air Force One. A lot of people didn't seem to catch that video when it came out, so I recommend watching it if you have the chance. But today, I want to instead talk about the 2 parks in Central Florida, because, well, these are something. While their coasters are interesting, they do lack their respective standouts like Air Force One. But to their credit, the Florida Fun Spot parks are not in actual parking lots, so that's an improvement at least. But in an area with world-class parks and rides, how does Fun Spot stack up to the competition? Well, I certainly have opinions on this, so please go ahead and leave a like, subscribe if you haven't, and join me as we explore the sketchy side of Orlando amusement parks. First up is going to be Fun Spot Orlando, which is actually just right across the highway from Universal. If you've ever been in the Universal parking garage and have seen the wooden roller coaster and Ferris wheel screaming for attention right across I-4, then this is the park that's trying to pick the last few pennies from your pocket if you've finished with Universal for the day. It's actually open until midnight or even later at other times of the year, but in juxtaposition to the theme parks, its main appeal is that it's just a collection of fun but simple amusement park rides. These have no appeal for me, but the park does offer a few standouts that make it worth a visit. If you're into thrills, then you might be interested in the Sky Coaster, which, fun fact, came from the MGM Grand Adventures in Las Vegas, which you might recall from my video on theme parks from the 90s. This type of attraction isn't something that I would ride, mostly because I'm honestly not sure if I trust it to be safe, but it's a good option if you're looking for an extreme type of thrill. What makes the park interesting to me are its 2 larger coasters though, and I'll start first with Freedom Flyer. Opening in 2013, this is a Vekoma family coaster, and is about as generic as a coaster that you can find. After ascending the lift hill, it twists around the park and is a fun first coaster for younger kids, but it's relatively forceless until its final downward helix, which then returns you to the station. You're probably not going out of your way to find a good family coaster, but I will say that Busch Gardens Tampa's recent edition of Phoenix Rising is a much better alternative. Still, Freedom Flyer at least provides visual interest to the area, and stands out among the park's collection of generic flat rides. The main draw for this park is its wooden coaster though, and being vaguely themed to moonshine running, it's appropriately named White Lightning. I do think it's kind of funny how the entry area has signs reinforcing the theme, which includes Willie the Hillbilly from the original Mountain Dew advertisements nearly 70 years ago. After exiting the station and cresting its lift hill, White Lightning is a fast, unrelenting down and back that was produced by Great Coasters International. Opening in 2013, its aggressive airtime and whippy turns actually makes it a standout coaster in Florida, and considering that the Florida climate destroys wooden coasters and so there are very few in the state, this is one of only a few options available. I won't count Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens because it's no longer a traditional wooden coaster, but your only other options in the state are Mind Blower at Fun Spot Kissimmee, which I'll discuss later, and then Coastersaurus at Legoland, which obviously is a lot less intense. If you want a traditional and aggressive wooden coaster that packs a punch for its size, White Lightning is definitely a standout, and is the one reason I would go out of my way to ever go to Fun Spot. Otherwise, the park is mostly just full of generic flat rides and midways full of carnival games and junk food. Towards the back, there is an indoor arcade where you can play for prizes, and there's a counter for food there as well, but otherwise, the only other real standout to attract people are the extensive go-kart tracks. Also located in the back, there are 3 different tracks with their entrances located in one central area, and if you're interested in them, I can see how Fun Spot would be appealing. However, between the constantly backfiring carts, which I think indicates poor maintenance, and my past experience with absolutely cutthroat kids who will bash you off the track, I can't say that the go-karts are particularly appealing to me either. Speaking of kids, when I went to go film the park at 10 AM in the morning on a weekday during school hours, I had to wonder why it was overrun by unattended middle school aged children who were causing chaos and screaming profanities and slurs on the rides. There aren't really any staff to keep order in the park, and strangely, I felt that they just move from ride to ride, so you're only able to experience certain attractions if someone happens to be there. The rides themselves have low fences that anyone could just climb over, and because staff moved around, ride consoles were left unattended, which if you really wanted to, you could probably access since there wasn't really anyone around to stop you. In fairness, the park did have one single security guy at the entrance who would send you through a metal detector that definitely wasn't on, but if you wanted to actually get into an area you shouldn't be in, I think it would be relatively easy. Parking and admission for Fun Spot are free, and in terms of attractions, you can either pay individually or pay $60 for access to everything, including the go-karts. Compared to the $30 pass at Fun Spot Atlanta, I'm not sure if this is really worth the price for one standout coaster, but it does allow you to go to Gator Spot, which is otherwise an additional upcharge. Off to the side of one of the midways, Gator Spot is a small area operated by Gatorland, which is also a park that I covered a while back in another video. This exhibit obviously features alligators with a few caiman thrown in, and is essentially a small loop around a few gator ponds. There were also a few parrots out as well, but walking in, I immediately noticed friendlier staff who seemed enthusiastic about talking about the animals. In contrast to the ride staff who obviously aren't paid or trained well enough to care, I was surprised by how much better the Gator Spot staff were, so that was a nice highlight which does make me want to go back to Gatorland to experience the park again. Overall, Fun Spot is an unremarkable place with one standout wooden coaster, and what you see is what you get. The park was clean when I visited, although I can't imagine that it doesn't stay like that during busier crowds, and unless you really want to ride White Lightning or enjoy fairground rides, I can't imagine why you would choose a place like this over the theme parks if you're visiting the city. Fun Spot Orlando seems well positioned to attract crowds near Universal, and in the same way, Fun Spot Kissimmee is located right outside of Walt Disney World. It's located right next to, or is perhaps part of, Old Town, which is a shopping and dining complex with its own set of attractions, which might be interesting to cover in a separate video eventually. However, Fun Spot here is directly accessible from Old Town, and otherwise has multiple other entrances located around the park. Since none of these have security and anyone can just walk in, it's even weirder to me that there's just one single security guy at the other location who doesn't do anything meaningful. If you want to visit both Fun Spot parks in one day and want a wristband to ride everything, you'll be charged an additional $10 over the $60 you already spent, but in terms of attractions, very little is different here. This park is designed to be a loop around a lake, and contains mostly flat rides, which are either similar or exactly the same as what you could find in the other park. Having checked back through my footage from Fun Spot Atlanta, that park also has the same types of rides and many clones as well, so I can see how Fun Spot has a formula that it sticks to. Fun Spot Kissimmee also has the world's tallest sky coaster, which drops you over the pond, and has its own respective arcade, which seems slightly larger than the Orlando location. However, if you're upgrading your wristband for $10, the reason you're going to want to do it is for the coasters. In this park, it's notable for containing Galaxy Spin, a spinning wild mouse coaster that might look familiar to you if you've ever experienced Primeval Whirl at Animal Kingdom. That said, Galaxy Spin does actually spin more aggressively than I remember Primeval Whirl ever doing, so it is a more intense experience. As someone who enjoys wild mouse coasters unironically though, I'll always ride one when I get the chance, so I did enjoy being able to ride it here. The main attraction for FunSpot Kissimmee is Mind Blower, a vaguely Western themed roller coaster that premiered in 2017 and was manufactured by the Gravity Group. What allows this coaster to stand out is that after its first drop, the train pulls up into an inversion, which is incredibly rare for wooden coasters. The layout is otherwise aggressive, jerky, and intense, and has a reputation for being extremely painful to ride. Having never been on it before choosing to produce this video, I was also very concerned with how the roller coaster literally screams through its layout. Yes, you can hear people screaming, which at first you might mistake for being the high-pitched sound, but after watching it cycle many times, that's just the sound that the coaster makes. Nobody at FunSpot seemed concerned about this, so hopefully that's just what it was designed to do to be intimidating, but I was also not looking forward to riding it because of its reputation. In addition, I've been on other Gravity Group coasters at Mount Olympus and the Wisconsin Dells, all of which were also extremely rough and have since proven to be serious safety hazards. That's the fault of Mount Olympus for not maintaining the rides properly though. Getting onto Mind Blower, I was actually surprised to find that it wasn't as rough or intense as I anticipated, especially when compared to the coasters of Mount Olympus. Still, I'm not entirely sure if it's safe, because after getting off the ride, I noticed this large splinter of wood sticking out of the track, which I assume does not compromise the structural integrity of the ride, but instead likely indicates poor maintenance. I have no idea if that's a normal occurrence for wooden coasters though, but between that and the unrelenting screaming sound, which may or may not be intentional, I'm not sure if this is a coaster I ever want to experience again. Otherwise though, the park doesn't offer much other than its go-karts, but I can see how when paired with Old Town, you could spend quite a bit of time in this area. So, having been to both of these small parks, are they really as sketchy as they first appear? In terms of FunSpot Orlando, I would actually say that while not particularly interesting outside of White Lightning, nothing ever felt unsafe. Sure, people could jump fences if they really wanted to, and the staff cared very little about anything, but at least they appeared to enforce some safety standards. Initially, I wanted to bring a GoPro onto Freedom Flyer and White Lightning, but I was told that I needed a media pass in order to be allowed to do so. FunSpot Atlanta never raised an issue with bringing a GoPro on Air Force One, so I was surprised that I couldn't do so in Orlando, but I will give them credit for ensuring people's safety. I do think that it could be handled better, as the SeaWorld and Busch Gardens parks allow you to bring GoPros onto coasters with the appropriate straps, and their ride operators are trained to know what they do and do not allow. I wish FunSpot did something similar, but if they have safety rules in place, I can respect why that's the case. In fact, I did observe staff at Freedom Flyer screaming at young children for not securing whatever they had in their pockets and kicking them off the ride, but at least someone wasn't getting hit by a phone or anything. Where FunSpot gets concerning is with the Kissimmee location though, because as I stated, I'm really not sure if I trust that Mind Blower is safe to ride. Again, I'm not an expert on ride safety, but after seeing an actual splinter sticking out from the track, I don't think I'll ever want to get on this coaster again. However, if we want to talk safety standards, I have to wonder why the park was operating its flying scooter ride with an actual cat just sitting under the vehicles as it cycled. You might think to yourself that it's just a cat that wandered in, which I don't know why you wouldn't shoo it away before running the ride, but not only is the cat used to the ride and completely unfazed, but he actually had food and water bowls within the perimeter of the ride. Is it funny? Yeah, but it means that FunSpot is feeding this animal and purposefully putting both the animal and riders in danger. If you've been around cats, then you know they're pretty easy to startle, so what if someone approaches the fence and causes him to jump as one of the vehicles swings overhead? It's just outright dangerous to not only operate the ride while the cat is in the perimeter, but to also provide him with food and water to encourage him to stay. So, are the Fun Spot parks worth a visit? I mean, I would say that maybe the Orlando location is interesting if you want the credit for Freedom Flyer, and White Lightning is genuinely great, but there's not really much else there unless you want to get bashed by a kid in a poorly maintained go-kart. Kissimmee, though, is a place that I don't want to revisit because I don't trust it to be safe. And while I'm glad that I experienced Mind Blower just once, I'm fine with never doing so again. The Fun Spot parks are exactly what you expect them to be, full of obnoxious people and kids, and barely being any better than parking lot carnivals. Are the sketchiest amusement parks in Central Florida actually sketchy? Yeah, I definitely think so, even though I had fun on some of the rides, but everything is obviously very overpriced simply because you're in Orlando and right next to much better parks. If Fun Spot could pivot towards more interesting experiences and standout coasters that distinguish them from the rest of Central Florida, while also bothering to pay and train their staff, then I can see them having more of an appeal, but as they stand right now, well, just be warned that you're not getting into anything really worth your time unless you're going for a few coaster credits. If you enjoyed this video, you can help me out by leaving a like if you haven't yet done so, and if you have not yet subscribed and hit the bell notification yet either, you can do so now to be alerted to new videos as they release.